Hey everybody, thanks for coming back, thanks for watching this video. And in today's episode, I'm going to be covering a little bit of a Photoshop tutorial. I want to show you how to use adjustment layers to correct and adjust skin tones. As you may know, I'm a photographer, portrait and fashion photographer specifically. I do a little bit of street photography and I do a little bit of art photography as well, and product and food and whatever else I can get my hands on. I'm going to be using one of my own photographs. It was for a client, and this is one of the images that wasn't selected for a cover. So here's the image. I've opened it up, and this is an image that I took for a client. And as you can see, I underexposed her face a little bit, and it's it's a decent photo. So now we're going to do a little bit of correction, a little bit of adjustment. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the image itself, and I'm going to decide, what do I want to do with it. And for the most part, what I want to do is I want to just bring down some of this, some of the exposure in the back. Like, it's a little bright. I think it needs to come down a little bit. So I'm going to add an adjustment layer. If you don't know anything about adjustment layers, it's very easy. If you go to your layers panel or tab and you go down to the bottom, you can see that there's a circle here, right? And that circle, it's like a black, one of those New York style black and white cookies. It's half black and half white, or half empty and half filled. And I'm going to click on that, and you can see all of the adjustment layers that you have access to here. Now, if you're working in RGB, in the RGB color space, you'll have all of your adjustment layers. If you're working in a CMYK color space, some of those adjustment layers won't be available to you. So the best thing to do is to work in an RGB color space, even though your images may go to print down the line, but work in an RGB color space and then convert it to CMYK after. So to bring down, the easiest thing to do, or the reason why I use adjustment layers, is because these allow me to fine-tune, if need be, if when I send it off to the client and the client comes back with some minor revisions, they don't like how dark it is or how bright it is or whatever, I can go back to the layers and I can adjust those without worrying that I've gone too far or that I've permanently affected the image with normal adjustments. So like I said, I'm going to tone down or bring down the exposure on the entire image, just because of the background seems a little bright. So I've selected the exposure adjustment layer, and if I go into, and this will pop up, this properties panel, and in the properties panel you can see that I have exposure, offset, and gamma correction. And what I like to do is just put down the exposure just a little bit, because it's, sometimes, especially if you're dealing with covers, images that need a lot of text or copy to go on top, or even a logo, that you need it to stand out as quite well. So bringing down that exposure for this image is important to me. And as you can see, if I slide the offset, I can really kind of play around with it a little bit, give it a little bit of a flatter look. If I use the gamma correction, if you just play with it a little bit, you can see where you can bring your image to, So I like the way it's looking, the flatness of the background. And that's important because there is going to be copy that runs across the top, usually the logo of the magazine or the word mark of the magazine or the title of the magazine goes up top here, and then you would get some copy that runs down the side. And in this instance, because it's not actually going to the client, because this is not their selection, that, that's really not necessary for me to do. But I just want to keep it true to form. And since this was for a cover, I will just edit it like a cover. So the exposure now is taken care of for the most part. If I turn it off and turn it on, you can see I've kind of darkened it, kind of flattened it out a little bit. And what I like to do is set the blending mode to luminosity, because if you look the difference between luminosity and normal just kind of flattens everything out. It flattens the color, it flattens kind of like brings down the exposure of everything. And I don't necessarily want that, so I want the color to come back. And that's the important thing, because I want that color to come back. Next thing, and the next adjustment layer that I'm going to add is a curves, because I think there needs to be more contrast in her face. I need to bring up the exposure a little bit, but I don't want to use the exposure adjustment layer. I'm just going to use the exposure, I'm just going to use the curves tool. I'm just going to bring it up a little bit on the highlights, because if you notice that on my right side are my highlights, and on my left side is my shadows. So I'm just going to affect the highlights there, and I'm just going to bring the shadows back down to kind of where it was. And as you can see, it's affecting the entire image. And I like clicking my layers on and off just so that I can get a better understanding of what I'm affecting and what I need to do moving forward. And with the mask of the adjustment layer selected, I'm just gonna fill everything in black. So it just masks out the entire adjustment layer. And then I'm gonna bring back just areas of her face using a I don't think 10 will do it, but maybe 50. 50% opacity, just bring back the areas in her face, because I just want, a lot more contrast and prominence, and just kind of like a little focus in her face, and maybe a little bit in her hand. And you can see now I'm just affecting those tones, her skin tone area, a little bit of her hair, and just to help separate the background from her. From that point, it's looking okay. But what I've noticed, and what a lot of you may notice when you're photographing people, is that the skin tone on the face, especially with women, skin tone on the face and the neck are different. And the reason why I say especially women is because, if you're using a model like I do, usually, you have a makeup artist on site, and you do, they have makeup on their face, but they don't necessarily have makeup on their neck. So the color is going to be different. Everybody in the world the color of their skin shifts from their forehead to their chin to their nose to their neck. So what we like doing in commercial photography, in fashion, any kind of like situation where we're photographing people, is we like to neutralize all of the skin so that it's even all the way through. And the best way to do that right now is to add a hue saturation layer. I'm going to look at her neck. Let's zoom in here and look at her neck. And as you can see, it's going a little too far. But as you can see, there's a lot more yellow in there. So if I go into the hue saturation adjustment layer, and under properties, you can see the presets. There's default, and then under that there's a drop down for masters. If I go under masters and I go to yellows, because I just want to affect this yellow area, and I want to push that yellow area, right? Because you can see if I push the yellow into kind of like a more of a green tone. You can see her neck is getting a little green. Her cheeks are fairly red, but then her chin area and her teeth are getting a little green. So what I want to do is I want to shift all of that into a red, somewhere where I'd be happy with. And you want to kind of match it up with the face. And I think that's not bad. I might just want to drop down the lightness, and then maybe a little bit of this, maybe a little bit of saturation. Yeah. Drop the saturation to -3. That'll be good. And we're only doing like little, very small increments, like nothing huge. We're not going like +10, plus 50 or +100 in these. I just want very subtle changes, because that's what is going to make the difference. And again, on the mask of that adjustment layer, I'm going to fill it in with black. I like using Command Delete on a Mac OS, Control Delete on Windows, and that just fills everything with my background color. And so now I can just brush back in the areas in her neck and just kind of above her shirt line, maybe a little bit in her jaw, just so that it's nice and warm. And if I turn it on and off, you can see that I've affected those areas, and just maybe above her lip, little bits here and there. You're going to notice a little. And the one thing that you can do is you can go to your info layer, or info tab. If you keep your info tab around and you kind of roll your mouse over the area, you can see the original and the change. So you can see in the RGB values before and after. You can see how far and close you're coming to kind of the original. And I think we're pretty good with that for skin tone. Now her skin tone's fairly even. Her face is still illuminated, and well, I think her face could be a little brighter. And so I'm actually going to merge all of these layers into a new layer. And what I like to do is hold Command Option Shift E, and that will convert all of these layers into a single layer, but keeping those layers previous. And I'm going to go into my Dodge and Burn tool. Let's go into Dodge and Burn. It's this little hand tool here. And I'm going to affect my shadows on this because I'm in the Burn tool. And I'm just going to deepen up the areas that I think that are needed, not going too far, just to create a little more exposure, a little more separation. The exposure that I have is usually around 10%. I don't try to go any more than 20%. You just want to have this subtlety to it. Now let's go to the Dodge. So if you click and hold this tool and go to the Dodge, I'm going to increase my brush size. And again, my exposure is at 20. Maybe I'll do it at 13, because that might be okay. And I'm going to affect the highlights here. See that? I'm going to affect the highlights and just brighten her face up and try to follow the contour of the subject's face. Because that's important too, right? Because if you're just adding kind of like, increasing the highlights in random areas, then it's just not going to look realistic. So you just want to add the increase in highlights just where highlights just where the highlights are naturally. You're just accenting them just a little bit here and there, right? Nothing too crazy. And as you can see right now, it looks a little odd right now because you can see that like her forehead's nice and bright, her cheeks are nice and bright, but then kind of like around her chin area, so forth. It's just a little kind of, flat. And that's because when you are dodging and burning, it's affecting the pixels of this layer, and it is really affecting the color. So what I like to do is change the blending mode. Go to in your layers tab, go to the blending mode. From normal, you're going to change it to luminosity. That way, you're not affecting the color of that. You're just affecting the brightness. Okay? And I think that looks pretty good. Her face is nice and bright, separate from the background. There is distinction between her hair and her face and everything else. And I think that turned out very well. If I don't like how bright it is, I can always play with the opacity. And I could drop it down to 75 because that might be a little better. Undo that. And then I redo that. That might, that might be okay. You can redo it. The one great thing is you can keep all of the detail and all of the original, the original aspects of your image by using adjustment layers. And if there's anything you don't like, you can always go back. And that's it. That is my Photoshop adjustment for skin tone tutorial. Super easy, super simple. I'm only using 3 adjustment layers and 1 final kind of detail layer up top. So that's the tutorial. I hope you got a lot of value out of it, and I think I'm going to be doing a lot more tutorials because I think, and I know that I have a lot of experience and I want to just share that with you. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. All the subscribers count, and leave a comment below. Let me know how you did on with your photo retouching, with your skin tone retouching. Don't forget to hit that notification button because you never know when I'm going to be dropping a new tutorial or a new video until I get a schedule down. It's going to seem very random. And thanks again for watching. So hope everyone stays safe and keeps creative.